I am here with Reid Hoffman and Ben Casnocha. They just had an amazing presentation on the main stage. Let's have another big round of applause from the folks today. The book is The Startup of You, a radical reimagining of the contract between worker and employee and how to approach our lives as an entrepreneur. I'd like to talk a little bit about the idea of permanent beta and the implications that has for education as a particular component of always retraining, acquiring new skills. How do you guys think about education as it fits into that idea?
Well, one of the things that's strange about the primary education model we have that's somewhat of a relic of the kind of the industrial age in the past is you kind of go to school for high school, college, then you maybe go to professional school, but you've been basically in the workforce. And you do very limited focus on any re-education. Given how much the world is changing, and given that the needs to adapt as a professional, as a worker, as a person in life, actually one of the things that is desperately needed, and we're seeing great services like Creative Live and others do this, is how do you get kind of more compact education as you go through life in smaller chunks and learning the things that you need to do to adapt to how the industry has changed, how your life has changed, and these sort of things. So going off this one monolithic model to a more of a semi-continuous model where you are doing some education while you're working or as a brief break, right? And then work and kind of live your life, and then more and as an adaptive pattern. How this relates to permanent beta is that we should always think of ourselves as a work in progress, as adapting to how the world's changing, and acquiring new, what we call soft assets, skills, networks, and that education should follow you your entire way through life. And it should be, you should think about it as responsibility of yourself as an individual. You shouldn't go, oh, great, my company's going to train me. They might, if you're lucky, but more often than not, you actually will need to take care of this yourself.
Sure.
Yep.
And if the assumption is that you're going to be continuing to retrain yourself and acquire additional education, how do you represent that? Because the way that education has traditionally been represented as a line on the resume. I went to such and such school, here's my degree, education, over and done with. So how do you represent that continuing acquisition of new skills?
Well, so obviously I co-founded a service that helps with this a little bit. You may have heard of it. And so, but not just the obvious ones where you can put in your own skills, you can add in your own education, you can self-represent. Part of what we have is we have an ability for people to endorse each other and say that they have these skills. So actually, for example, if there's particular skills that you think that it's important to be known by, you can get folks to say, I'm actually really good at, public speaking or writing or coding or negotiating, or the skills index on LinkedIn is very broad. It includes ballet dancing, boxing, whole set of things. And so
I'll have to add the boxing one to my profile.
Only if you think it's appropriate.
Actually, that's an excellent point.
Yes. And so, so those are an obvious way to doing that within LinkedIn. But also, for example, if your skill is more on the creative side, obviously having some examples of what you do, either on a blog or a website. There's functions for this on LinkedIn. Right? These sorts of things is a way of doing that. And so, but to make sure that you are essentially giving some evidence of the skills you have, right, in a way that people can discover it, they can find it, and then they can quickly understand it when they encounter you in the world.
And this is actually kind of a core value of Creative Live, and I think it's one of the ways in which the sort of traditional corporate world is merging with the creative community, in that creatives have always represented themselves through a portfolio of work, the photos they've taken, the pictures they've drawn, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I really like about LinkedIn is the opportunity to highlight certain projects that you've worked on that can essentially function like a portfolio in the traditional world.
Yes.
And that is, I think that's one of the things that is going to continue to be more and more focused on as people look for their first job out of school. So maybe that's something worth talking about in terms of education. So since a simple degree isn't really enough to define you and help you get that first job. You're not going to get that on-the-job training that you used to. What are some of the things that you should be doing as a young person in college to set yourself up, maybe with a portfolio to come out of school?
I'll let Ben start with this one, given that.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, these are really interesting themes, Rick, that you're touching on. And just to follow on the credentialing theme that you brought up, if you graduate from college and you've come out of college with a bachelor's degree, that used to signal a whole lot. I think it's increasingly signaling less, and we'll need to find, not only will we need to be acquiring new skills, as we've been talking about, but also find ways to signal that we have those skills, and with kind of micro credentials or other things. I mean, I think the question coming out of college, or really at any point in your career, but especially coming out of college when you're still trying to figure out what your competitive advantage is, to touch on the thing we just talked about on stage, is to figure out what are the skills that I need to know, the skills that I need to have, the knowledge I need to know in order to succeed at the job I'm in or the job I want to have. And the way you learn those things is by talking to people in your network, right? You talk to people who are a couple steps ahead of you. Talk to your boss, talk to your boss's boss. What are the things that they learned? What are the things that were important for them to be successful? Deconstruct how they learned those things, and then go do that yourself. I think the best way to learn anything is to find people who already have the skill and understand their process for acquiring the skill, and then do it yourself. So it's very much a network theme, I think, and especially early on when you really don't know. Once you're on a path, it's more obvious of, I'm trying to get really good at coding, I need to go to this boot camp, or I need to go to this class. But early on, you want to be talking to people. What are the things I need to know? Before I begin signing up for classes and attending seminars, which Creative Live class should I view today? Well, that's a function of what my competitive advantage is, what my assets are, what my aspirations are, and what the market realities are.
And the last thing I would emphasize on this, and this touches the last point that we just covered, which is taking intelligent risk, which is for high school students, college students, when you're thinking about the length of your career, what's much more important is what the nature of the opportunity is. It's not what you're being paid for a summer internship or something. It's like go and volunteer for work when it puts you in the right network, get you the right skills, get you access to the right industry. It's so much more important to do that than it is to say, this one will pay me X dollars an hour and this one will pay me Y dollars an hour. It's how do you acquire those networks, those skills that start in an industry that will be important to you. Is so much more important than anything else.
Yeah, and it's not the degree that you have from the school you went to necessarily, it's what you can provide on day one.
Yes.
A recent example, so I happen to be a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, and I get hit up from the alumni network pretty regularly. I'm a liberal arts grad, I want to come work in Silicon Valley and do marketing. I see you do that. And I'm like, great, what can you do? And whereas there's this kid who approached me in a really smart networking way. He's 20 years old. He's going to community college in Arizona and has been working in political campaigns since he's 18. He knows SEM. He can copyright. He has a portfolio of stuff that he's demonstrated. And I don't care that he didn't go to a named school. This kid has skills and can contribute on day one. I think that's something that people miss in college so often. And can you talk a little bit about building up that portfolio of skills, maybe for career changers as well? Like, how do you you talked a little bit on the main stage about doing projects in work and volunteering. Like, what are some other ways that you've seen people sort of move between current to future?
I think the key thing when thinking about a career transition are what are your transferable skills, right? What are the things that you're learning that are generalizable? We tell a story in the book of a guy that was editor-in-chief of Time magazine, this guy James Gaines, who at 62 years old underwent a pretty significant career transition. He left print journalism, left the old media world, and went to join a young online media startup run by a bunch of 20-somethings. And the way that he was able to take a risk that very few of his colleagues in the industry were willing to take is he reconceptualized his identity as storytelling, from print journalist to storytelling, and focused his last couple years at Time on building, not just focusing on hitting 600-word deadline by Tuesday night to hit the Thursday press run, but rather building skills, restudying the craft of writing no matter the medium. He reached out to professional storytellers in New York City to learn about the art of constructing a narrative. things that are broadly applicable as opposed to the narrow industry-specific skills. So as he geared up to make a transition, he doubled down on the things that he could bring with him, the assets he could bring with him to a different but related field.
And then, the other obvious ones are, we talked about on the stage, which was essentially volunteering, like I did in product management at Apple, volunteering for things that will get you new skills, taking time to go get education, take a creative live class, other things which are relevant. And then also, sometimes, by the way, it's figure out a larger project. Like say, for example, you decide, the kid you're referring to with SEM, you say, look, I want to learn SEM. Well, then set aside every weekend for the next 6 months in time and work on that and make something happen. Adopt a project where you're learning that, and ideally do it with some of your friends.
Yeah,
right. Where you can do it.
Collaboration's key. I was thinking, like, every time you watch a Creative Live class, have someone in your network watch the same class and then talk about what you learned from it and reinforce the learning. Right? It's always better in collaboration.
That's actually a really exciting trend that we're starting to see. Our local networks springing up to gather together, watch Creative Live, discuss what was taught, and then go demo what was taught to build that portfolio. And it becomes like a reinforcing local cycle. I think it is really, really exciting. And what are some other trends that you guys are seeing in terms of online education starting to impact how people are retraining themselves?
Well, I think one key thing is that while there's a lot of interesting innovation happening, primarily through the internet, it's still heavily driven by individuals in terms of making the decisions themselves.
Yeah.
So you need to do that, right, as individuals. Second thing is amplification, just in terms of what Ben was saying, which is it's much easier to do this education when you have someone to talk about it with and kind of ask questions and so forth. And I think you'll see on what you guys are doing, a bunch of other things, there'll be more kind of student-to-student interaction around the content. I think you'll see more and more of. And then I guess the last would be is to keep, to be willingness to be a little experimental, right? Because one of the things about the benefit of a lot of these, this kind of the online revolution in education is it allows you to take things in smaller bites. And so try some things that you would not have otherwise tried, right? As an instance, to kind of see what the range of possibilities is.
Yeah, I think that's one of the trends, if we think of this event as the secrets from Silicon Valley, I think that's definitely, some of the trends that we've been hearing from multiple speakers, the willingness to experiment and if something scares you, that's probably a good thing. Like you want to kind of steer into the skid and take small steps to gain mastery over whatever that thing is that you don't know. Just get started with something new that you haven't necessarily done before. What's really exciting to you guys about the changing nature of work right now? Like, what are you most excited about with kind of this new contract that people have?
I think it's increasingly a meritocracy, and there are some serious social implications of that we need to grapple with as a country in terms of an increasing winner-take-all economy, or the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But I think those that have the skills, it's to your example of the Notre Dame kid versus the kid from community college, right? Yeah. Being able to acquire skills and represent those skills and to obtain various micro credentials, I think will let the real talent bubble to the top, as opposed to folks that obtained the shiny degree 20 years ago and are still riding that all the way to the bank. And so I think that's always a good thing. When the best people can bubble to the top, more innovation happens, the world improves. So I think overall these education trends are democratizing education and allowing people from all walks of life and all backgrounds to participate in the education process and participate over their whole life. And I think that's a very exciting thing.
Yeah, I would amplify on the meritocracy is it allows talent folks who might otherwise been in a remote area, lower income, all of a sudden to have real opportunity. We all benefit from that. I think that the ability of the fact that all these online resources, everything from education to an ability to kind of connect with through a network or to content that helps you guide where you're going, I think is really interesting. I mean, part of how the internet revolutionizes, just beginning to revolutionize the way we work in order to, because essentially what you do as a professional is you solve problems. If you can solve problems faster and more accurately, it creates creates massive productivity
Right.
increases. And so I think that is all becoming much more possible. And I think that the nature of almost all work is collaboration. And even in when you don't have two co-authors on a book, right? It's still a lot of collaboration because you're getting a lot of feedback and what do you do?
There's an editor, the guy who works on the cover.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And so tools to the evolution of the process of being efficient and effective in collaboration, I think will also have great productivity gains for all of us, but also kind of opportunities for each of us as individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's a broad trend that we're seeing across society. It's less of a top-down hierarchy, more of a networked interconnectedness, and that changes the very nature of how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. And the fact that education is heading in that direction as well with things like Creative Live and open access to information. People from Nebraska to Nairobi, as Chase likes to say, can improve themselves, empower their own lives and skills to go after their dreams and passions, which is pretty exciting.
Awesome.
I want to thank you guys so much for coming to Creative Live. Before you go, what did you think of the main stage experience?
Oh, it was fun. Good group of people in the audience. I think you guys have among the kind of the best setups to make it very natural and human in what you're doing. I think that's awesome. I usually just stand behind Ben and let him speak. But
I thought the camera arm at the top was very impressive. It was very long. Just the arm would reach out and come back, and that was mesmerizing when Reid was talking.
Yes.
I was focused on it.
Awesome. Cool. The book, again, is The Startup of You. I want to thank Reid and Ben for coming by. Really appreciate it, guys.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.